Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Tom Singer and Craig Brown.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thanks for picking our little podcast because we designed this show to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. Go check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Tom Singer, and I have the honor to co-host this show every single week with Craig Brown. Craig is an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. Hey, Craig, here we are again.
Hey, Tom, and we get to see each other's face. This will be fun. I hope I'm the bad guy because I live in a place where my network is unreliable, but right now it's working, so let's go.
That's right. We although most of you are listening to this on audio, we do sometimes record the video, and sometimes Craig's a little wonky with his video connection. But today, all is good, and it is time for another digital battle. That's right. Every month or so, we invite Mark Pendergast to come and join us. Mark is the content trustee for the Digital Enterprise Society, and he has a background in engineering as an engineering IT architect and a development leader for PLM. He did that for over 30 years, and he still contracts with companies because he's right in the middle of everything to do with PLM. And he and Craig come head to head on these battles. And today we are going to talk about cloud versus on-premises. Ooh, I like this one. All right, guys, let's get started. Mark, cloud or on-premises?
I tell you what, I'm a big on-premise guy. There's places where you can use the cloud, but I tell you what I've found is it's very use case driven. You got to look at what you're trying to do, and there are some loads that just love to go up to the cloud, and there are some where you will be fighting it to your dying breath. So I think you need to really understand what you're getting into and what the trade-offs are, because it is not a slam dunk. It is a lesser of two evils in many cases.
All right, Craig, what's your thought? Cloud or on-premises?
Cloud lets the innovator win. And what I mean by that is the cloud enables the capabilities that a big corporation might have in the hands of a really small company. And while there are some other issues around product security, which I'm sure I'll touch on before we're done, the cloud enables faster innovation. And maybe that's its best selling point. It's also rather new. And so there's some other things it's learning along the way. But there's some mighty big corporations behind the best cloud technology. And I have to believe they will fix those shortcomings. But I'm becoming more and more of a cloud fan. When I was still in the big corporation, I had huge concerns about product security, the security of the products we were developing, because candidly, I didn't want that in the hands of the cloud guys. I didn't want them to know what our future products would look like. And I didn't want them to figure out a way to make money off of it before we figured out a way to make money off of it. So I think part of the possession of intellectual knowledge, especially product knowledge that might drive your profits, that's one of the weaknesses of cloud is assurances to the corporations that this won't be a problem. Now, there's been all kinds of security stuff installed, encryption and all the rest, and it's looking like, in fact, it's pretty secure. Other people, like the governments, have done studies about, are clouds secure enough, and have starting to conclude that, with the right vendor, and we're talking about, the big guys, Microsoft, Amazon, there's a bunch of others, that by and large, they have implemented security in a responsible way so that your product guy doesn't lose his secrets. So if you solve that problem, then the cool thing about cloud is with very little investment, you and I could start a company and we could take on the big companies if the real thing that mattered was our new idea, our new product idea, and not all the other rigmarole to make a company work, which is important, but it's like outsourcing it all to the cloud.
So what factors determine the correct strategy here, Mark?
Well, I think you've got a few of them that are really important. One is your tolerance for latency. So going to the cloud takes some time. The physics of it say that, light can only travel so fast, so electrons can only go slower than that, and it takes time. So things like direct control of machines and things like that don't like to wait 500 milliseconds for things to come back and talk to them. I think another big one is your data volumes. We got in fairly early trying to do simulations up in the cloud. And you may know that simulation data sets are humongous, and it was taking forever to load them up there and get them back down again. So CAD up until recently has been very difficult to do in the cloud because, again, the data sets can be absolutely huge. If you've got a battleship or a B-52 and you're trying to move that model up and down, you're going to run into some problems. So I think that's a big one. Security, I think Craig mentioned that. But it is certainly a concern. And then also, if you're going to go to the cloud, related to that security is today, a lot of big companies have only 2 or 3 entry points, maybe one per region into the cloud. And to make the cloud really effective, you have to have an entry point at every single site. And somebody like a General Motors or somebody like that, they may have 1,000 sites. So now you've got 1,000 entry points for all those little hackers to try and hack into. And that's a scary thing for a lot of companies. They want that, they want that single point of entry to the internet so that they can defend it to death. And I think that's a big problem. Also in engineering, we find a lot of times we need to take that stuff and stick it in hardware. And you can't put the car up in the cloud or your bench test setup or whatever. It's got to come back down to you. So again, that's stressing that bandwidth, that's stressing the latency. And so I think those are a lot of the factors that help you determine your strategy is really, can you invest in a really high quality network at your 1,000 sites? Now, again, as Craig said, you're a little startup. Hey, you got one site. You can buy the biggest link you can. But and in the United States, that's pretty cheap. But I tell you what, you go to Morocco, you go to Kuala Lumpur, you're paying through the nose for internet, and all of a sudden the cloud's not as attractive.
So, Craig, what do you think? What are the factors for determining the correct strategy?
Well, I think Mark hit on many of them, and this thing about file transfer is one of the Achilles heels, right? I think if you go to the cloud, so I'll answer it a different way. If you're going to put your data in the cloud, then leave it there. Leave all of it there, except for how to set up your equipment, be it a test lab or a manufacturing plant. And then when you measure data from a real world experience, whether it's a product in the hands of a consumer or off your manufacturing floor, yeah, you need that multiple pipes that Mark talked about. You need a pipe that's big enough. And, it's just like, we were joking about internet at the beginning. If your pipe's too small, then you can't connect all these things like clouds and thousands of other people to interact with. And, there've been interesting articles in the past month here about 6G, right? 5G's barely rolled out and in many places hasn't rolled out. And now we're talking about 6G. Did you realize in places in the world, South Korea is one of them, the speed of their 5G network is like tenfold what it is here in the United States. So this variety of access speeds, if you will, the size of the pipe, is one of the things that's going to hold a cloud back, unless you happen to be a company that can stay within those constraints, whatever that is. So I think the factors are, do you have to move files or can you just move interaction, meaning the edit maneuver or the viewing of something, right? If all the viewing engines are sitting in the cloud with the models of your product, well, then all you're really seeing is like what we are doing with Zoom. You're seeing a projection of it. You're not even seeing the whole model. I think people are really uncomfortable with that because of what I mentioned earlier is, ownership of the idea, ownership of the design means you possess it. If you put it in a third-party service like a cloud, you worry about, do you still own the possession, right? And like cryptocurrencies, though I don't want to go there, if you come up with some way to encapsulate it and secure it, well, then you really don't care what filing cabinet it sits in, and it's better off to not move it around so you can avoid some of these other factors. So if you address security, I think security is the number one. And then the second one is it has to be accessible to all the places your company works. including your customers. And if you can't figure that out, well, then you're only going to move a piece of your operation to the cloud. The trust side, the security side, to me, that's the biggest factor. The technology front, performance and latencies, and it's going to keep improving. And you might decide to put your company's manufacturing in a part of the world that has the best pipes, if you will, meaning the broadest, and that might be good for South Korea. I was just surprised to learn that. It's interesting to me that a smaller country has been able to build their infrastructure in such a way to really enable communication networks. So that'll be one of the factors. Is if you're someplace where you just don't have that, I guess you're going to hope on a satellite link. But then there's going to be latencies there that will not tolerate file movement. You'll have to do just a visual display and edit maneuvers, right? That would be up in the cloud the whole time.
Yeah. Well, so, you hit on a good point there. And that's one that we were looking at when I stopped getting interested in it is how do you get your virtual desktop? How do you get your virtual PC up in the cloud so you're just looking at whatever the screen is seeing? And that is coming along as well. I mean, there's use cases where that works really well, and there's use cases where it doesn't work so well. And I think that is a big enabler for the cloud, is being able to say, hey, my PC on my desk is just a screen that's looking into all the processing that's going up on the cloud.
See, I'm reminded, we had a couple guests, it's been a bit now with the pandemic, but they were from the providers of the cloud, right? If you will, Amazon, Microsoft, and the rest. We even had one from Facebook. What was interesting in all of their discussion with Tom and I was the focus on making the server deployments wherever they put them in the world the exact same, and they use PLM to help manage that. And then the other thing was they could focus the innovation of the cloud. So Mark, you understand this, the backplane, how the data gets moving around from all these processors, whether they're simulation processors or databases or whatever. They're actually doing IC design to streamline communications in the backplane of that computer network, right? Mm-hmm. Well, of course they have to. That's the only way you're going to get the speed. Well, it flabbergasted me. I hadn't thought about that in a long time. And I'm like, well, they have the money to do that, right? If you ask corporations, even big car companies, do you have the money to do that? The answer is no, not really. That needs to be done as part of infrastructure. Well, infrastructure from somebody like an Amazon is happening. It's happening really well when it comes to cloud. So one of the attributes about cloud, embracing the cloud should be, is it where the innovation's happening, meaning the IT innovations of databases and so on. And of course, the answer to that is yes. And it's going to happen faster there than it will probably everywhere else. So we should get on board and use the cloud. Now, maybe there's a way to think about, we're talking technology stack for a moment. Maybe we should talk about what we put in the cloud and what we don't put in the cloud. And I think that might be what maybe brings the cloud along even faster. There's a lot of stuff we do that's not proprietary that might well benefit in the cloud because it's probably cheaper at the end of the day once you got it running.
So you guys have kind of touched on my next question already, but I want you to elaborate a little bit. And that is, what workloads absolutely belong in each environment? Some things are better suited for on-premises and some probably for the cloud. So, Mark?
Okay. Well, I tell you what, the cloud is good for just general purpose computing. Where did the cloud start? Web services, web pages. Does those really, really well because they're kind of lightweight things, not a lot of intensive work. Files are small, not a lot of stuff going on. So I think analysis of big public data sets. So if you're going through some climate data or something like that that's already up on the cloud, as Craig said, if the data's up there, you might as well be up there with it. And I think search, of course, are the granddaddy of all applications up there, but it tends to be lightweight stuff, general purpose, not pushing the hardware too hard, just lots of users coming in wanting a lot of stuff is great for the cloud. I think on-prem, some of the things we talked about, like shop floor control, where you're right on the machine, and if you go to sleep for a little bit, all of a sudden you got the router running off the end of the piece and drilling holes where it's not supposed to. Data acquisition is another big one that's really tough. In fact, one of the biggest applications that I fought with was, as we're now doing autonomous driving, you've got to maintain all the video data and all the sensor data from your 10,000 miles of car driving in every condition you can imagine. I tell you what, we can barely manage that on-prem, let alone figure out how to jam it all up into the cloud. Hardware in the loop testing we talked about, anything that's massively integrated. So a lot of our on-prem systems exchange data all the time, MRP to engineering to shop floor and back again. And those integrations, if you're not all in the same cloud, the cloud-to-cloud integrations can be very, very complex. And certainly when you got to get down, as we say in engineering, to the bare metal. So a lot of times if you're doing very intensive simulations, you want nothing between you and the hardware. You got to run as fast as you can. And there are some very boutique cloud providers that can give you that, but they are few and far between. And if you just go up to get a general purpose cloud account, your simulation's going to run, 1,000 times slower. So, and certainly some gray area. I think CAD is starting to come into its own in the cloud. I think PLM is starting to become a cloud thing. Simulation, if you can put your workstation up in the cloud and use some kind of virtual desktop, right. You can do simulation up there, provided you never bring it back again.
Right. Yeah. So I mostly agree with what Mark said. I want to come at this a slightly different way and just point out that real-time control, so the things that Mark mentioned about the factory and the closer you are on the hill bench, the more it's real-time, the more that latency matters, the more it probably has to be on premises. That's just the state of the technology. That will change over time, as it has already. But, these semi-automated vehicles or assisted driving systems, as they start to rely more on the cloud, the reliable communications for real-time control will get figured out, and then everybody will benefit. And it'll probably be automated truck fleets long before it'll be automated vehicle passengers, passengers like you and I. So watch for that, and then watch as they develop how much of their stuff is in the cloud. Now one area that I dug into as a result of some other things I've been doing is simulation. I've actually been shocked at how fast simulation has moved into the cloud. And it's largely because Amazon especially chose to do it, and then chose something like Formula One or aircraft design as a place to specialize. And so, again, they've specialized hardware in their compute farms that help the computer computational fluid dynamics calculations, which are complicated to the point about getting to bare metal. Well, they've actually designed chips that make that go faster. And so I think simulation's in the cloud. I don't know how much longer you're going to have to build your own HPC anymore. And I don't know that I really want that control outside of my big corporation if I were still working at one. But that discussion will be had. It'll come back to product security at the end of the day, right? Do we trust the people running the cloud? So that one's one I think will be in the cloud sooner than you might think, but real-time control probably won't. Everything else a corporation does, market research, marketing, sampling customers, all that other stuff you got to do, claims and warranty and service orders. Wow. I don't know why it wouldn't be in the cloud. It just is. It's transactional in nature. It's not real time. So it can be handled by the fastest computer on the planet as long as you can get the data to it. If you can't get the data to it, you spin up a little cloud in whatever country you're in and let it handle it. But from an architecture point of view, it's the same technology.
So that sort of transitions into the next question, and that is what needs to happen to be able to increase cloud adoption? Craig, I'm going to start with you because you sort of just touched on that.
Well, I'm not a big regulation fan. However, it's like the electrical utilities of 100 years ago. You probably need some standardization on what to expect so that you're not confused as you adopt the cloud, right? As a consumer, as a company, how do I get more comfortable with adoption? Well, part of it is not just the cost of ownership, because that one's kind of won already. Another part of it is just that it will work, right? Well, how do you make things work repeatedly? Well, through standards, right? And you have an agency that starts to enforce standards and so on. And so I'm not a big fan of bureaucracies that do that, but you need them. And so that's one thing you really haven't seen yet. Mark, what you do for a living is a little closer than I am, but I would guess that that's sorely lacking. And when you watch those other industrial revolutions that have occurred, when there wasn't standardization, well, then things got really noisy, and people didn't know which vendor to choose, and so it stayed noisy until there was some standardization. So I think cloud adoption, the other thing to challenge just the way we word the question is, don't assume it's a good thing, right? I mean, we should adopt it if it's a good thing, meaning it's a profitable thing or it's an efficiency thing. We shouldn't just embrace it to give control to another party, right? That I think is the scary thing going on that I mentioned earlier, that I'm not sure how we get over that. And I don't really want a regulatory body overseeing it, but I don't know any other solution. So maybe that's what we need.
Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll springboard off of what Craig said. I think you're going to see like an ISO 9000 or something for the cloud that gives you that auditing, that gives you the benchmark of what they should be doing. Do they do what they say and say what they do and all that stuff? Because I think right now a lot of clouds look like black boxes. And I think, Craig and I have been in the business where you go out to your suppliers and you audit them and you look in what they're doing and you make sure that you're getting what you think you're getting. And I think that is not here yet. And I think it's coming. And we just got to figure out how that's going to happen. I think cheaper bandwidth always is a big thing. Better control of your routing and the security on it, so that security filtering, instead of having one big massive hard point to the internet, figuring out how to do that on a distributed basis. Because like I said, right now, last time I looked, we had 3 entry points to the cloud, and that was it. And so there wasn't a lot you could do with the cloud unless you were going region to region.
Clearly cell phone providers have figured that out, because you can move around the country and you switch networks all the time. So come on, cloud guys, get it figured out. Maybe they need 6G. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, but how many Eastern Europeans are looking inside your phone at this moment?
More than we want to talk about.
Yeah, so I probably don't want my product data in something that loose. So I think that's it. And the last big bugaboo that nobody's been able to figure out is cloud integration. We have this cloud sprawl. You got to go to all these different cloud providers that are tailored to each thing. And then you're trying to say, well, can I ship my BOM from my PLM cloud to my ERP cloud? And they say, well, no, you can't. And then you're stuck, and then you don't know what to do. And I think that's one that's making it hard, is this cloud sprawl, the inability to interoperate between clouds. And again, we fought that with on-prem back in the day, and we kind of got it figured out. Well, now we need to refigure it out for the cloud.
Yeah, and that's classical evolution engineering and systems, right? I mean, that is a clear measure of a lack of standardization. And so eventually there'll be a standard. There always is. And I mean, the public will require it if nobody else will. And then it'll get better. There'll be a partnership. It's interesting how these things happen. From what I've seen in history, there'll be a partnership of probably the 3rd and 4th place guy who will then form the standard. And all of a sudden, the 1st and 2nd place person will say, oh, we have to join the standard because, that's where the world's moving. So, standardization happens for one clear reason, which is to get rid of inefficiency. And when the reasons they're different are not profit driven, then it's no longer important that they stay different, right? And that's what will get them back to a standard is when the money side of it is a non-influencer. And what I mean by that is it's no longer a competitive advantage, whatever that discrete thing is. And if it's no longer a competitive advantage, it's going to get standardized. So you might as well get involved in standardization, because somebody will, one of your competitors will. It's just you're absolutely guaranteed it.
So I love these digital battles. So I'm going to give you each a last word. Craig, let's start with you. What is your last word on the idea of cloud versus on-premise?
It's here. It's going faster than I expected, and the security stuff will get addressed.
Mark?
I think they're always going to have some stuff on-prem, and I agree with Craig. It's coming. I think it's got to take a little longer than what we think, but for a lot of workloads, It is the obvious place to be.
Well, Craig and Mark, thank you again for joining me here on the Digital Battle for the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. Do me a favor, come back every single week for more thoughts, ideas, and actionable information in and around product lifecycle management. The Digital Enterprise Society is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Go check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.